Let's just kick things off with a question that sounds like it's been ripped straight from a wild sci-fi movie.
Could the Mongol horde, 100,000 strong, actually defeat a single weapon from 800 years in the future?
Okay, let's dive right into this epic what if. We're going to look at two legendary Mongol leaders, a grandfather and his grandson, each one facing a piece of 21st century military tech that, should be completely impossible for them to deal with.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll set up these two incredible showdowns. Then we'll pit the tech against that legendary Mongol might before we jump into each battle step by step. And finally, we'll get to the biggest question of them all. Why did one Khan manage to survive while the other was completely annihilated?
Right. So our story here involves two pretty incredible clashes, putting the raw, brutal power of the 13th century up against the, technological terror of the 21st. So check this out. On one side, you've got Genghis Khan himself leading his unstoppable land army against a literal flying fortress. And on the other, you have his grandson, Kublai Khan, at the helm of the largest invasion fleet the medieval world had ever seen, going up against a warship that is, for all intents and purposes, completely invisible.
Now, before we even get to the fighting, we've got to compare the forces. Yeah, we're talking about an 800-year gap in technology, but we're also talking about a timeless advantage in tactics and discipline that, it might just level the playing field.
Okay, scenario 1. Just look at this contrast. The AC-130 is circling way up there at 7,000 feet, totally untouchable. The best Mongol bows, they top out at maybe 1,500 feet. The plane sees the world in heat signatures, but on the ground you have an army whose strength is its incredible discipline, its ability to just scatter and regroup, and this amazing intelligence network of riders that could cross an entire continent.
And then you shift to the sea, the USS Zumwalt. It's a 15,000-ton ghost. To any kind of detection they had in the 13th century, it would look like a little fishing boat. And what's it up against? Just the sheer, overwhelming mass of Kublai Khan's fleet. We're talking 4,400 ships, relying on nothing more than eyeballs and signal fires to find an enemy that moves in almost total silence.
All right, so the year is 1219 AD. We're over the vast Central Asian steppe, and the greatest land army in history is about to face an attack from an enemy it literally can't see, hear, or touch. The attack kicks off at dawn. A shell from a 105mm howitzer just detonates in the middle of the Mongol column. There's no warning, no enemy in sight, just a massive explosion coming out of a clear sky. Then the 30mm autocannon opens up, just raining down explosive rounds from directly overhead, which makes their shields completely useless. For that first hour, it is an absolute slaughter. But, and this is a huge but, the man in charge is Genghis Khan. And he had this incredible talent for looking at impossible problems and just reframing them. When he first ran into fortified cities, he didn't give up. He captured their engineers and made himself the greatest siege master of his era. And that's exactly what he's doing here. He's observing, he's learning, and he's adapting on the fly. You can see his genius just play out in these tactics. His scouts tracked the plane's lazy circular pattern. He noticed it kept hitting the most concentrated groups of soldiers. So he gives the order, disperse. But the real masterstroke was setting the steppe grass on fire. It was a classic Mongol tactic, but here, the goal wasn't to fight the enemy anymore. It was to outlast it. Now, he wouldn't have known the words infrared or electro-optical, of course, but Genghis Khan could see that the smoke and the intense heat were messing with the sky weapon's ability to target his men. He effectively invents a 13th century countermeasure to a 21st century targeting system using nothing more than dry grass and a brilliant understanding of his environment. So after about 10 hours, the AC-130's got to land. Its fuel tanks are running on fumes. Now, it's inflicted some serious casualties, somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 men. A terrible, painful loss, but for an army of 100,000, it's survivable. The Mongol army, battered but not broken, lives to fight another day. All right, now let's fast forward 62 years. We're moving to the sea. Kublai Khan's enormous invasion fleet is sitting off the coast of Japan. But this time, the enemy isn't up in the sky. It's an invisible shadow, moving silently right there in the water with them. The whole thing starts at 3 a.m., in total darkness. The Zumwalt is just listening. It's painting this perfect map of all 4,400 ships without sending out a single radar ping that could give it away. The crew identifies every command ship, every supply vessel, every single transport, before any Mongol sailor has a clue that they're even there. The first Tomahawk missile hits a flagship.
There's no sound of it coming, just a fireball that lights up the ocean. And this isn't some dumb projectile, it knows exactly where it's going. Within 20 minutes, the fleet's entire command structure is just gone. By the time the sun comes up, the most powerful invasion force of the medieval world is nothing but a burning, scattered wreck.
And this is where you see the really tragic difference between this battle and the one on the steppe. On land, that famous Mongol discipline saved them. But here at sea, their instinct to cluster together for protection, it worked catastrophically against them. Their formations basically turned into perfect, efficient kill boxes for the Zumwalt's weapons.
Which brings us to the really crucial question. We've got two impossible matchups, two Mongol Khans, two weapons from the future. So, why did one army survive while the other was just utterly destroyed?
Well, it all boils down to a few key things. On the open steppe, Genghis Khan used the terrain itself as a weapon, right? He created fire and smoke to counter the enemy's biggest advantage, its sensors. But out on the open ocean, there was nowhere for Kublai Khan's fleet to hide. The environment offered zero defense. So in the end, Mongol adaptation won the day on land, while Mongol convention led to disaster at sea.
Genghis Khan's incredible survival really demonstrates a timeless truth of warfare. Just having superior technology doesn't guarantee you a win. The adaptability of the commander, the clever use of your environment, and just the sheer will to outlast your opponent, sometimes that can overcome even the most insane technological advantage.
Which leaves us with one final thought. If a 13th century general could figure out how to counter a 21st century weapon in a single afternoon, then what's the real deciding factor in war? Beyond the tech, beyond the armor, what's that one timeless element that truly decides who wins and who loses?